What is Thomas Aquinas's argument from motion? So in our previous video, we talked about cosmological arguments for the existence of God. And Aquinas's first three ways, his first three arguments for God's existence, are all different kinds of cosmological arguments. The first is called the argument from motion, and that's the one that we'll be looking at today. So, to briefly recap on what a cosmological argument is, a cosmological argument begins with things that we can observe about the world around us, about the things that we can see and touch and experience. Our observations about the world then start us on a chain of reasoning that leads us to the ultimate conclusion that there must be some reality upon which everything else that we observe ultimately depends. And this reality must not itself rely on anything else for its existence. So, in his first way, Aquinas calls this reality the unmoved mover. Okay, so how does the first way begin? Well, remembering that we begin with observations about the world. So Aquinas's first way begins with the observation that things in the world change. Aquinas calls this process of change motion. So he says, he begins with this idea that things in the world are in a state of motion. So for example, an egg becomes a caterpillar, which then becomes a butterfly. Okay, so what does it mean when we say that things are in motion or that they change? Well, Aquinas says that change just means going from potentiality to actuality. Okay, so what the heck does that mean? From potentiality to actuality. Well, let's use an example. So right now, I'm sitting in a room that is quite warm. So I am actually warm. But I'm also potentially cold. So I'm not actually cold, but I could become cold. I have that potential. Now, if someone were to turn on an air conditioner or give me an ice cream or like drop an ice cube down the back of my shirt, I might go from potentially cold to actually cold. And that is what change is. Change, or motion in this context, means moving from potential to actual. Now, note that in that process of change, from potentiality to actuality, I always rely on something else outside of myself. So if I were to go from warm to cold, I would rely on a window opening or cold air, an air conditioner, ice cream, an ice cube. Something else has to make me cold. I can't just snap my fingers and say, oh, great, okay, now I'm cold. And this is something that Aquinas points out. Nothing that changes itself. Change is always brought about by something else. Now, the reason for that is that I can't be both potentially something and actually something. So I can't be potentially cold and also actually cold in the same respect and at the same time. That would be a contradiction, right? So in order to go from potentially cold to actually cold, I need something outside of myself that already actually is capable of making me cold, like an ice cube. Okay, now if I were to look at the world around me, like really look around and think about it, I would find that I am surrounded by a network of changes that are constantly occurring. Sometimes those changes are happening quickly and sometimes they're happening very slowly. Now, all of these changes in the world around me rely on and are prompted by other things. And what I will start to note when I look at those changes is I'll start to see kind of chains of cause and effect, chains of causation. So let's say, for instance, I turn the kettle on to make a cup of tea. In that moment, the water starts to get hot. but it's only getting hot because the kettle has been turned on. And the kettle could only be turned on because it's drawing power through a power board, and the power board is only working because the electricity plant is supplying power to it. There's that chain of causation, right? Now, if any part of that chain were to become disconnected, so if the electricity cut out, for example, then that whole process would stop, right? The water would stop heating in the kettle straight away. Okay, so there are two things that we can note there. The first is that there is this chain of causation, and the second is that these changes are all, like the cause and effect, it's all happening simultaneously. So this is an example of what we call, big fancy term coming up, ready? We call it a hierarchical series of simultaneous cause and effect. I'm going to say that again. A hierarchical series of simultaneous cause and effect. So in other words, we have a chain of things that are all prompting change in one another, and it's all happening simultaneously. They're all kind of stacked up on top of each other. It's kind of like a pile of books sitting on a table. Now, Aquinas' argument is that a series like that of simultaneous cause and effect cannot continue infinitely. Okay, it has to stop somewhere. That pile of books that are all supporting one another must ultimately be resting on something, like a table. Something has to be supporting the whole system. Now, here's a question. Why is that the case? Why does something have to be supporting the system? Like, why can't a series of simultaneous changes just go on infinitely? Well, okay, this is an image that the philosopher Edward Feser uses, and it's actually an expansion on an image that Aquinas himself uses in his description of the first way. Feser basically says, okay, imagine that we have a hand that's holding a stick, and then it uses the stick to move a rock. Now, in that moment, both the hand and the stick, they are both causes of the stone's movement, right? However, there is a difference between the two of them because the stick is what we would call a secondary cause, while the hand is what we would call a primary cause. Okay, so what do we mean by those two things, secondary and primary causes? Well, this is how Feser puts it. He says, quote, "The stick moves the stone, but not by its own power. By itself, the stick would simply lay on the ground inertly. It can only move the stone because the hand imparts to it the power to move it. The stick has causal efficacy only insofar as it derives or borrows it from something else. By contrast, the person who uses the stick is a primary cause insofar as his causal efficacy is built in rather than being derivative or borrowed." Okay, big hefty quote. What is he saying there? Well, he's saying that a secondary cause is something that has the power to cause change only because it derives that power from something else. So, for example, an ice cream has the power to make me cold, but it derives that power from the freezer that it was kept in, and the freezer derives its power to make the ice cream cold from the power board. Now, when we look at all of creation, we can see that ultimately the power to bring about change is always ultimately derived from something else. There are actually no absolutely primary causes within the created order. Everything in the created world exercises its causal power only because it ultimately receives that power to some extent from something else. And Aquinas' argument is that at some point, we need what he calls an unmoved mover. So something that causes change and sustains that whole chain of motion that we see in the created world, but it itself is not being moved. It's not deriving that causal power from anywhere else. Now, some people might hear that and think, okay, but again, why? Why is that the case? Why can't we just have a self-contained system where everything is interconnected and everything relies on something else within that system? Why does there have to be something at the end of the chain? What if it's not so much like a chain as like a circle, right? What if it's an interconnected network that is kind of self-sustaining? Okay, well, to answer that objection, let's use the analogy of a computer. Now, in one sense, a computer is a self-contained system. So it's a network where everything within it sort of relies on something else, but the whole system is kind of self-contained. However, it might be self-contained, but it's not self-sustaining. The entire computer ultimately is being powered by electricity. And that electricity comes from outside the computer. There is no one component within the computer itself that is the source of that electricity. Every component within it merely passes the electricity along or uses that electricity, but it's not the source of that electricity. Now, if someone were to claim that the computer was generating its own electricity, that it wasn't just self-contained, but also self-sustaining, you would naturally ask them, okay, well, which part of the computer does that, right? Where can we point to? Where is that source of electricity? You would expect them to be able to point to something within that computer that possesses that power in its own right, rather than merely passing it along. Now, Aquinas argues that the same kind of concept applies to the world. If someone were to say that the created world contains within itself the ultimate source of its own causal power, then they would need to identify what that source is. But everything that we observe only exercises causal power because it depends on something else. It's like a part of a computer passing on the electricity. So Aquinas concludes that there must ultimately be something whose power to actualize and to bring about change and movement is not borrowed or derived, but belongs to it by its very nature. And this is what he calls the unmoved mover. Now, at this point, we haven't arrived specifically at the God of Christianity. At this stage, Aquinas hasn't yet shown that the unmoved mover is also omniscient, omnipotent, or the God revealed in the Bible. Those conclusions require further argument. His only aim at this point is to show that there must be an unmoved mover upon whom all changing things ultimately depend. So that is Aquinas' first way. In our next video, we will discuss his second way. I can't wait. Talk to you soon. Okay, bye.